It's great to speak today to Jay Gallagher, who is the Chief Strategy Officer for EMEA here at Edelman. And we're going to talk over the next few minutes about the idea of tipping points, which is the principle that's underlying this year's trends report. Because I think if we kind of take a step back and think about where we are in the world at the moment, we're operating, as people, as businesses, as brands, in an environment which feels extremely dynamic and extremely volatile. Things feel and look very different from one day to the next. And the reason we focused in on the idea of tipping points is, it's a way of being able to, anticipate and then ride this incredibly fast-changing environment. So we're very excited to hear about what your point of view is on, tipping points for brands and businesses. What do they mean?
Well, look, I think we work in an industry which is addicted to newness. And in order to navigate, and the world is this frenetic, in order to navigate what that sort of newness and where it becomes valuable, we need to create an edit function. And I think the concept and structure of the tipping point is so important because there's always going to be 10,000 new things happen a day.
Yeah.
And you can discover anything. There will always be someone posting something on social media. Go, oh, that could be interesting. At what point do those become powerful enough or relevant enough or uniting enough for people to activate their brands or their businesses or their sort of groups engaging with them? Well, really we need a mechanism for that. And it can't just be stick your finger in the air and decide if that's interesting enough for where the wind is. And I think your model of tipping points, which takes us from the very faintest signal through to a point where it becomes mainstream, and really importantly, looks at not just action but reaction. Yeah. And at what point does it swing back? And how can we identify those reactions to the point where they then become the driving point? Yeah. And I think you really need that structured approach to doing it. Because at speed, when we have to take decisions at speed, we need the architecture to make those decisions the right ones and powerful ones. Okay,
so let's go a little bit deeper than that, because you were talking there about having kind of like the frameworks in place to be able to make the right decision, right decision at the right time. And you were talking about we're in an industry that's addicted to newness. So just to push you a little bit further, how is it that we as communicators and marketers, who are the equivalent of people who go off chasing squirrels in the park every time something new comes along, how is it that we develop that kind of rigor and ability to look beyond what might initially be a short-term trend to look at kind of like what are the underlying forces underneath that?
I think this is the balance between new and powerful.
Yeah.
And I think there are so many new manifestations of the same thing.
Yeah.
So at what point is something a new thing that's happening? And at what point are we getting to the powerful core which is driving multiplicity of behaviours? And I think this is why it's important to not just look at the signals, but not just look at the noise, but look at the overall signal that applies. And a trend is because it's a consolidation of multiple things happening in the same direction.
Yeah.
And I think that's also a really good sort of mental map to have for, is this something we should be going with? Yeah. Is it part of a consolidation of multiple actions? And then you can react and act on one of those because it taps into a wider, more powerful cultural truth.
Exactly.
Rather than this is a new thing.
Exactly. So it's like, what does that trend tell us, as it were?
Yeah.
So if people are putting themselves on dopamine fasts, if young men are going onto 9-hour flights and then raw dogging them, allegedly, so that they don't have, there's no, they don't have a phone, they don't have any books, they don't have anything else like that. And there's lots of, thinkers writing about how boredom is like a really important development part of childhood. Looking underneath all of those signals, you say, okay, reset of our relationship with the idea of kind of like, what does downtime, what does boredom mean for us?
But also, what is mental resilience?
Exactly.
And that sense that our need for constant activity is a sign of weakness rather than of curiosity.
Yeah.
And that taps into another one of the things you've talked about, which is the retreat from exploration to protection. And this is part of that same thing. And you've got the same core, and you can see how it's activating economically, societally, but also in those individual moments where people say, I'm going to protect myself from constant stimulus.
The last thing I want to talk to you about is how a brand or a business can take one of these tipping points and think, oh, there's an opportunity here. I can use that maybe to, drive fame, drive growth. And as we know, because we face it every single day, doing something distinctive or different comes with a risk and as well as an opportunity. As someone who's out there on the front line, working with leaders, giving them the means to act. How is it that you're talking to the leaders of business about, identifying what is the right thing for them to act on, and why is it important to do something?
Well, I think this is something I could talk specific. I'm going to talk sort of quite generally about that, because I think it's an ethos. It's harder than ever to drive growth in business. And when you're in tough times, fear of loss outweighs hope of gain. And that means trying something new you can very easily see, well, the risks of that and the risks of that and the risks of that. And part of our job is, of course, to help people navigate the risks. But if you're not tapping into cultural tipping points, moments that create unity, interest, or map a pivot in what people think and feel in society, you're also missing on the opportunity to surprise, to delight, to demonstrate empathy. You've become a brand on transmit because the only thing you're allowed to talk about or do is to engage with your world, which you've built. I think that really matters, because although we have an age of abundance in communication channels, we're reaching an age of scarcity in attention. I saw the stat recently, 75% of all ads which are based on viewership receive no human attention whatsoever. Tapping into cultural tipping points, understanding your audience and being valuable to them because you connect with what's happening in their world, gives you the opportunity to step beyond messaging into being valuable, and heaven forbid me to link it back, but to earn a role in people's worlds.
Oh, you're not just settling for 1 second of somebody's attention at the beginning of an advert. You're opening up a longer conversation and potentially relationship.
Yes, because you get them. And I feel understood is one of the most powerful things people can experience from a brand. It's what creates communities, it's what creates fans, rather than what creates consumers and what creates commodities.
There we have it. Thank you, Jay. That was great.